Yarn Pet Trio. It measures 17 inches wide by 6 3/4 inches deep. It's on wood that is 13/16 thick, a little bit over 3/4. And so it's a very heavy base. Will hold three large cones or bobbins or balls. The distance between each of the rods, the center to center distance on those rods, is 7 inches, which means you could put cones that measure up to 7 inches in diameter. Now you could put a larger one on one side and a smaller one in the middle, and then a really large one on the other side as well, exceeding 7 inches. With the Yarn Pet Trio, you get 3 yarn guides. They can be moved in any combination of those holes on the front. They just unscrew, and then you press them in place. Turn them to where you want them to go. You also get 2 different size wood discs. You see the wood discs mounted on those rods? One is 2 7/16, one is 2 inches. Those discs fit up inside the cones, and you adjust the height with the steel collars that you see pictured there. In addition, you'll get a collection of rubber stoppers. The rubber stoppers go onto the rods to secure the tops of the cones. Not all the cones require them, but some of them do, and we give you a selection of those rubber stoppers so you can fit just about any cone. The Yarn Pet Trio can also be used in situations where you want to have multiple balls of yarn serving, let's say, 3 knitters who are sitting on a sofa, and let's say the Yarn Pet Trio is sitting on the table in front of them. So instead of having 3 individual yarn pets or a yarn pet duo, you could have a Yarn Pet Trio, and they would be available with shorter rods. These rods are 11 1/4 inches. You could go with 6 3/4 inch rods or 8 1/4 inch rods. We have 3 different size rods, all for different purposes, but in any event, these can also be used to hold balls of yarn, like our normal pet line. But without question, the Yarn Pet Trio really shines in its ability to hold large cones. It's a great cone holder. It has a low center of gravity. It's not going to tip over. Uses our tensioning system, which allows the yarn to come through the guide and then be directed in any direction that you want, but allows you to get it off the cone in an orderly manner. On this sequence, I'm going to run 3 cones on the Yarn Pet Trio. The Yarn Pet Trio is a brand new product. It holds 3 cones. They can be up to 10 inches tall. And I'm going to feed those 3 cones up to the cone winder. And you can see I have the cone winder directly above it on the table. Now you may ask, what's the purpose of this test? Well, I had a customer call the other day. He was feeding a skein winder, another brand of skein winder, and he was running 3 cones at the same time. And if you've ever tried to put 3 cones on the floor and feed directly overhead, you know that there's a high probability that they're going to get tangled, and they can move laterally due to the way the yarn comes off the top of the cone. So he needed some help, and we were in the process of developing the Yarn Pet Trio anyway, which is a top of the line cone holder essentially. It's not designed for balls. You could put balls on them like we do on the other Yarn Pet products, but this Yarn Pet Trio is a heavy-duty cone holder. But not only that, it employs our new Yarn Pet technology, which involves allowing the cone to spin on the rod, not to remove the yarn vertically, but to pull the yarn off horizontally and then take it through those guides, and then take the yarn directly overhead, which it could be to a skein winder, it could be to this cone holder, it could be to anything. It doesn't really matter. But it will be very orderly the way it does it. Now we're pulling yarn off 3 cones with the cone winder. And those 2 big cones, those are over pound and 8 ounces each. So those are big cones. They're 7 inches in diameter. They're on 7-inch cones, but they're way over the top. So you can see how the cone came out. You know, we're pulling three different cones with different yarn on it, and this just illustrates how that would have wound it onto the cone. Now I'll show you how yarn coming off the cones vertically really, you know, they really move around quite a bit. Let's see what happens. Now, if I put a third cone in the middle of that, it clearly would have been all tangled up by this point. The only reason they survive in this mode right now is because they're separated by about 14 inches or so. Okay, but you can see there's quite a bit of movement, and there's quite a bit of twisting going on there too, you know, with the yarn going all over the place. So it's quite a bit of movement. You go back to the video I just showed you with the vertical, you know, the way the yarn was coming off horizontally and then going vertical. It was a straight line. None of this shenanigans here with the dancing all over the place, twisting. So there's absolutely no question in my mind that the yarn is doing all kinds of stuff there that it probably shouldn't be doing. Now, do people seem to mind that? Apparently not. But there's stuff happening to that yarn which can be completely eliminated with the method I showed you earlier. The other thing is this ball, and I only have my guide at about 20 to 30 degrees, you'll notice. Typically when we're winding balls, we would put that in that position. That tends to add enough tension coming off a Swift or you know, a traditional cone the way we use it anyway, not traditional the way a lot of people use it. Now the reason this is so squishy and no tension is because it's coming off the cone vertically. You know, there's absolutely no tension on the yarn when it comes off the cone vertically. That can be a good and bad thing. What it typically means is that another device has to add tension. You cannot use the yarn really coming off of that cone and going to something else without adding additional tensions. I know the sock machine people, they have to have their own built-in tensioners in order to fix that problem. So part of the solution to some of those issues anyway is that when you bring the yarn off the cone horizontally, there is a little bit of drag from that. There's no question. Especially coming off traditional cones. These cones, traditionally wound cones I should say, you know, the yarn's on there a little trickier, it's a little more difficult to get it off horizontally when it's wound in that manner. When you wind it with our cone winder, it's easier to get off. So you have a lot less drag when you bring the yarn off of a ball that we wind on a cone as compared to bringing the yarn off of a mill wound cone. The yarn has catch points all the way up and down the line is what I find. So there's more drag when you do it that way. They don't seem to have that drag when you pull them off vertically. So maybe that's the one advantage. When you use a vertical cone, or when you use a standard cone and you pull the yarn off vertically, there really is no tension. But it does mean that you have to add tension somewhere else. You know, there's very few, if any, applications that don't want tension added to the yarn. I haven't seen any anyway. So somewhere down the line, if you pull your yarn off vertically, you've got to add tension somewhere else. With our system, you know, we've got the built-in tensioning in the system that allows you to adapt the tension to your application much more easily, we think. Pulling toilet paper off a roll that's sitting on the floor. This is emulating yarn on a cone. And you see what happens to the toilet paper? It gets twisted. As it comes off that roll, it just gets twisted more and more as you pull it off. And that's exactly what happens to yarn when you're pulling it off a cone.